The storm had been grumbling over the city for hours, low thunder rolling like distant warnings Laura Mendez kept trying to ignore. She sat alone at the edge of her couch, robe pulled tight around her, scrolling through old photos of Emily on her phone, fresh-faced graduation pictures, blurry selfies, shots where they were laughing so hard Emily's hair stuck to her cheeks. The rain tapping the windows almost soothed her, until the shrill, unfamiliar ring jolted her upright. It wasn't her normal ringtone. It was the emergency tone she didn't even remember setting. "Ms. Mendez?" a formal voice asked the moment she answered. "This is security from the Carnival Horizon. We're contacting you regarding your daughter, Emily Mendez." Laura's breath stilled. What about her? She's supposed to be on vacation. She's supposed to be safe. There was a pause, too long, too careful. "I'm very sorry, ma'am. Your daughter was found unresponsive in her cabin. Paramedics attempted resuscitation, but she was pronounced deceased at 21:14 hours." The words didn't sink in. They clanged inside her skull, unreal, unreachable. No, you're wrong. Emily's fine. She texted me yesterday. She said she was going to watch the sunset. She wouldn't, her voice broke. She wouldn't just die. "We understand this is difficult," the voice replied, softer now but still painfully rehearsed. "Initial assessment indicates a fall inside her cabin. There is no sign of foul play." A fall? Emily hardly tripped over her own feet, let alone fell hard enough to die. "I want details," Laura whispered. "I want to speak to whoever found her." "I'm afraid that's not possible tonight. The captain sends his condolences. Our team will follow protocol and coordinate with local authorities upon docking." Protocol. Condolences. Docking. Cold, empty words. Laura's mind raced. Emily had sounded tense in her last voicemail, though Laura had brushed it off as pre-trip nerves. "Mom," Emily had whispered, breath hitching. "There's something weird about—" "Never mind. I'll tell you later." Now later would never come. Laura's knees gave out. She slid to the floor, phone pressed to her ear even though the voice kept repeating, "Ma'am? Ma'am, are you still there?" She finally hung up. The storm outside crescendoed, lightning flashing across her dim living room. She stared at the silence, waiting for reality to shift into something that made sense. But nothing changed. The world kept spinning indifferent. Her fingers trembled as she reopened Emily's voicemail. The familiar softness of her daughter's voice filled the room, a sound that now sliced instead of soothed. "I'm scared." Laura clutched the phone tighter. "Scared of what, baby?" she whispered to the empty room. She didn't know how long she sat there, minutes, hours, maybe ages, rocking gently, replaying the voicemail until she could hear every tiny breath, every tremor, every unspoken plea. Something was wrong. She felt it deep in her bones, a truth blooming like ice through her chest. Emily didn't die in a fall. Emily didn't die accidentally. Emily didn't die the way they said. But grief fogged everything. Her heart was a fractured organ, barely keeping rhythm, each beat asking why. Why had Emily sounded afraid? Why had the call felt scripted? Why had they rushed to call it an accident? Lightning cracked again, illuminating the room. In the flash, Laura saw her reflection in the window. Hollow eyes, trembling lips, hair plastered to her forehead with sweat. A mother who had just lost her only child. She curled forward, pressing her forehead to her knees, clutching the phone against her chest like a lifeline. "Emily," she choked out, "please don't be gone." And there, alone in the storm-lit room, Laura's world shattered completely. Yet beneath the devastation, one fragile, desperate thought took root. She would get answers. No matter what waited for her when the ship docked. The morning after the storm felt unnaturally bright, as if the world refused to dim itself for Laura's grief. She stood at the edge of the port, clutching a cup of untouched coffee, staring at the massive Carnival Horizon as it docked, its glossy colors mocking her with their cheer. Yesterday, that ship had held Emily. Today, it held only answers Laura wasn't sure she was strong enough to face. But she walked forward anyway. Port security guided her through a narrow hallway that smelled of metal and salt. No one met her eyes. No one offered comfort. They all moved with the same stiff, controlled politeness. just like the voice on the phone last night. A woman in a navy uniform stopped her at a door labeled morgue, authorized personnel only. Ms. Mendez, the woman said softly, though the softness sounded rehearsed, practiced. We're very sorry for your loss. Laura swallowed. Just take me to my daughter. Inside, the air was cold enough to sting. A single metal table sat under harsh lights. Laura forced each step forward, her breath trembling. When the sheet was pulled back, the world went blurry. Emily's face looked peaceful but wrong, too pale, too still. Her lips were split, faint bruising traced the edges of her jaw, and there was a long, dark mark along her temple. That's not from a fall, Laura whispered. The uniformed woman hesitated. The official assessment. Don't, Laura snapped, voice cracking. Don't lie to me. Tell me what happened to my daughter. Before the woman could respond, a man stepped inside. Mid-40s, sharp eyes, detective's badge clipped to his belt. He scanned the room, then gestured subtly toward the hallway. Ms. Mendez? A word. Laura wiped her eyes and followed him out. I'm Detective Miguel Soto, he said quietly. Local authorities brought me in to review the circumstances of your daughter's death. That means you don't believe the crews either, Laura said, her voice wavering with a fragile hope she didn't want to admit. He lowered his voice. Between you and me? Her injuries aren't consistent with an accidental fall. But Carnival's legal team is already pushing to finalize the incident report. Finalize? Laura repeated. She died last night. That's how these companies operate, Soto replied. They want this closed before the media catches even a whiff of it. Laura's chest tightened. My daughter deserves the truth. I agree, he said, glancing over his shoulder, but they're locking everything down. Logs, footage, staff statements. They're all aligned. Rehearsed. Exactly like she felt on the phone. I want to see the room she was found in, Laura said. His jaw flexed. They won't allow that. I'm her mother. And they're the ones who control access, he said, frustration creeping into his tone. Look, I'm not saying give up. I'm saying this is bigger than it looks. Bigger. The word sent a cold shiver down her spine. Before she could respond, two cruise officers approached. Ms. Mendez? We need you to sign the preliminary incident documentation. The taller officer added, for insurance and release purposes. Laura stared at the clipboard. At the line where they had typed cause of death, accidental fall. At the blank space waiting for her signature. No, she said. Both officers stiffened. Ma'am, it's standard. I'm not signing anything until I know what happened to my daughter. The shorter officer's smile tightened. We understand you're emotional. Laura stepped closer, her voice trembling but firm. You have no idea how emotional I am. But I'm not stupid. My daughter didn't die in a fall. Detective Soto cleared his throat. She has the right to delay signing. A tense silence followed before the officers reluctantly stepped back. Laura looked through the glass window at Emily's still body, her heart breaking all over again, and hardening at the same time. Something happened on that ship. Something they were hiding. And as she turned toward the exit, gripping her bag, she felt the weight of Emily's voicemail echo again in her mind. I'm scared. The words followed her out of the morgue. The walk from the morgue to the port's collection office felt heavier than the one that had led her inside. Laura's legs trembled with every step, grief pulling against determination like two forces wrestling inside her chest. Detective Soto had stayed behind, but his warning echoed with every footfall. They're closing the case fast. If that was true, then Emily's belongings were the last pieces of her daughter the world hadn't twisted yet. She clung to that thought like a lifeline. Inside the belongings room, a clerk wheeled out a gray plastic bin and placed it on the counter. Everything recovered from Miss Mendez's cabin, he recited, eyes avoiding hers. Please verify and sign. Another signature. Another attempt to wrap her daughter's life in neat paperwork. Laura ignored the form and opened the bin. Emily's clothes were folded too neatly, as if someone had tried to erase the chaos of her final hours. Her favorite denim jacket. A notebook. A single sandal. And on top, Emily's official phone, screen cracked, battery drained, Nothing unusual for a teenager. But something felt off. Laura sifted deeper. A pair of sneakers sat at the bottom, laces knotted. When she lifted one, it felt strangely heavy. Her pulse kicked. She slipped her fingers inside. Something hard scraped her knuckles. A phone. A second, smaller one. Hidden. Laura's throat tightened. Emily had never mentioned owning another device. She looked up sharply at the clerk. Was anyone else with her belongings? He blinked. No. This is exactly how the cabin staff found them. A lie, she could feel it. But confronting him would lead nowhere. She tucked the hidden phone into her jacket and closed the bin. Outside, she sat on a cold metal bench overlooking the water. The second phone powered on after a long, strained vibration. Its lock screen cracked like a web of secrets. There was no passcode. As if Emily had been desperate for someone, maybe her, to find it. The message inbox was a storm of panic. Unknown numbers. Half-finished sentences. Time stamps from the night she died. He followed me again. I don't trust the officers. They said I have to meet him. Please answer. Laura's hands shook as she opened the photo gallery. Dozens of blurred selfies appeared. Emily wasn't smiling. Her expression was tense, scared, eyes darting behind her as she snapped photos too quickly to aim. In the corner of several images, a man's silhouette appeared, tall, broad-shouldered, wearing what looked like a white cruise officer jacket. The same jacket mentioned in the security notes Detective Soto hadn't been allowed to show her. Laura clicked on the final recorded file. The audio crackled, distant voices and footsteps muffled beneath the wind rushing past a cabin door. Then Emily's whisper filled the speaker. I'm scared. Laura squeezed the phone, forcing herself not to crumble. The voicemail she'd replayed all night had been just one piece. This recording was another. And the fear in Emily's voice wasn't vague, it was immediate. She replayed it again, listening for details. A man's voice faded in near the end, too distant to understand. A door slammed. Emily gasped. The clip cut off abruptly. Her daughter hadn't died from a fall. She had been terrified of someone on that ship. Laura locked the phone, pressing it to her forehead as the waves slapped the docks in rhythmic anger. I'm going to find him, Emily, she whispered. Whoever he is. Whatever they did. Footsteps approached. Laura's head snapped up, expecting security. Instead, Detective Soto stood there, hands in his pockets, expression grim. They're restricting access to the ship, he said. If you're planning on digging, you'll have to be fast and quiet. Laura stood, resolve igniting through the grief. Then I'll start tonight. Soto eyed her carefully. Start with the people she spoke to. Someone must have seen him, the man she kept avoiding. Laura looked back at the water, fingers tightening around the hidden phone. And somewhere on that massive ship, the man in the white jacket waited with answers she was no longer afraid to chase. Detective Soto's warning followed Laura long after she left the docks. By evening, she found herself standing inside a cramped security office lit by flickering fluorescent bulbs. Soto had managed to get her 5 minutes with the footage before Carnival's legal team locked everything down. 5 minutes. That was all she had to see what the ship didn't want her to see. A guard loaded the file, avoiding eye contact. This is the only segment we're allowed to show. Allowed. The word made Laura's stomach tighten. The footage began with a hallway camera outside Emily's cabin. The timestamp read 2047, less than 30 minutes before Emily was found unresponsive. Laura leaned forward, gripping the edge of the desk. Emily emerged first, hair pulled into a messy bun, anxiety clear even though the quality was grainy. She checked over her shoulder twice. Then she froze. A man stepped into the frame. Broad shoulders. Moving with a quiet authority that made Laura's skin crawl. And the jacket? Crisp, white, with gold trim. A cruise officer. Emily backed up, shaking her head. The man spoke, gesturing sharply. Laura watched her daughter's fear grow until she was practically pressed against the wall. Emily said something, silent on the video, but her movements were frantic. Then came the part that made Laura's heart slam against her ribs. The man reached for her. Emily recoiled. And then, the screen glitched. A static line sliced across the footage, then smoothed out as if nothing had happened. The man stepped backward, expression unreadable. Only then did Laura notice something else. His face was blurred. Not by the camera. By editing. Who did that? She demanded. The guard stiffened. That's how the clip was submitted. That's how it was modified, Soto corrected, jaw tight. Original footage isn't supposed to be blurred. Laura pointed at the screen, voice rising. Someone erased him. Soto lowered the volume as footsteps approached outside. Our time's up. The guard yanked the drive from the monitor with a speed that confirmed everything. Someone didn't want her seeing any of this. Outside the office, night had fallen. Cruise passengers disembarked in waves, pulling luggage and chatting loudly, blissfully unaware of the darkness hiding in the crevices of their vacation memories. Laura watched them with a hollow ache. One of them might have seen him, the man Emily feared. She approached a young couple lingering near the railings. "Excuse me," Laura said, trying to hide the desperation in her voice. "Did either of you see a crew member wearing a white officer jacket? Tall man? Around the last night of the cruise?" The couple exchanged a look. The woman hesitated, chewing her lip. "Actually, I did." Laura's pulse jumped. "What did you see?" "He was talking to girls," the woman whispered. "Young ones. He offered us a private excursion. Said it wasn't on the official itinerary. We said no. It just felt wrong." The man nodded. "We saw him again on deck 9, arguing with another girl. Blonde. Looked scared. Emily." The confirmation cracked something inside Laura, but it also sharpened her. "Do you know his name?" she asked. They both shook their heads. "He said he worked in guest services," the woman added. "But when we asked another officer about him, they said no one by that description existed." Laura stepped back, breath unsteady. A ghost in uniform. Someone who moved freely, yet didn't officially exist. A chill rippled down her spine. She moved from passenger to passenger, families, groups of college students, older couples. A pattern emerged, whispered in fragments. "He approached my niece. He said he could get us into a closed-off beach. He asked if we were traveling alone. He made me uncomfortable. The same man. The same jacket. The same invisible presence running through the ship's darker corners." And then a middle-aged woman, her face pale, murmured the words that shifted everything inside Laura. "People say he's part of something. Girls go missing on cruises. Not all of them fall." The implication hit Laura like ice water. Human trafficking. Emily hadn't slipped, stumbled, or fallen. She had been hunted. Laura stood frozen as the night breeze whipped her hair, the weight of the truth settling like an anchor on her chest. And somewhere in the shadows of the port, she felt it. The investigation had only just begun, and the next step was finding the girl who vanished alongside Emily. Night settled over the port like a curtain of secrets, thick and suffocating. Laura remained on the pier long after most passengers had wandered off into taxis and shuttles. Her mind replayed the rumors, the blurred footage, the man in the white jacket, each piece fueling a storm inside her chest. Emily hadn't been alone. Someone else had been pulled into the same dark web. And that led Laura back to the final name she'd heard whispered by 2 teen girls earlier. Alana. No last name. No known cabin number. Just a single, frightened face described by passengers who had seen her trailing behind Emily earlier in the cruise. If Emily befriended her, and Alana vanished the same night, then they were connected by more than coincidence. Laura headed back toward the ship's open deck area, where bars were still closing down for the night. Music drifted from speakers being unplugged, each fading beat sounding like a heartbeat slowing to silence. One bar remained half-lit. A bartender wiped down tables, his shoulders hunched, eyes darting to the shadows as though someone might be listening. Laura approached carefully. "Excuse me, I'm looking for someone who might have worked last night." He froze at the sound of her voice. "Depends," he said without turning. "Who's asking?" "Laura Mendez," she said, her voice steady despite the dread twisting in her stomach. "My daughter was found dead last night. I know she talked to a girl named Alana. I just need to know if you saw them." The bartender's hand tightened around the cloth. Slowly, he exhaled and turned toward her, tired eyes glossed with something that looked like guilt. "I remember your daughter," he said softly. "She ordered a soda. Said she didn't drink, but her friend did." "Alana." He nodded. "Pretty. Dark hair. Nervous. Kept looking over her shoulder." He swallowed. "They weren't supposed to be down here." Laura's breath hitched. "What do you mean? Why not?" He scanned the empty deck once more before leaning closer. "Because they were being watched. Both of them. I saw that officer, your white jacket guy, talking to Alana earlier in the night. She looked terrified." A chill slid down Laura's spine. "Did he touch her?" "Not in public." His voice lowered to a whisper. "But he followed her. And your daughter noticed. That's when Emily started asking questions, trying to get Alana away from him." Laura gripped the edge of the bar. "Please, if you know anything else." The bartender shook his head sharply. "I shouldn't even be talking to you. People who ask questions around here, they get fired. Or worse." "Worse," Laura repeated. He hesitated, as if weighing a decision that could cost him everything. Then he leaned in again. "Sometimes," he whispered, "girls don't leave the ship the way they're supposed to." Laura felt her breath stop. "What do you mean?" He looked toward the dark ocean, voice trembling. "Foreign ports. Small docks. No cameras. Some of the crew, not all, but enough, they escort girls off the ship. Off the record. Offer them modeling gigs, private parties, exclusive excursions." He swallowed hard. "Some never come back." The words sank deep into Laura's bones, colder than the ocean wind. "Are you saying Emily was taken?" she asked. "I'm saying," he replied, "if that officer approached her the same way he approached the others, then she wasn't supposed to die in that cabin. She was supposed to leave the ship." Laura staggered back. The ground felt unsteady beneath her feet. Emily's voicemail replayed in her memory. "I'm scared." The hidden phone messages. The blurred footage. The girls who disappeared. Emily didn't fall. She didn't die. She was running. Running with Alana. And something, or someone, had stopped her. Laura forced air into her lungs, gripping the railing to stay upright. "Where would they take them?" she demanded. "Where do these girls go?" The bartender shook his head. "I don't know. I hear rumors. That's all." "Rumors like what?" His eyes lifted to hers, haunted. "That some ports have buyers waiting." The world tilted. Laura grabbed the bar for balance, nausea rising as the truth wrapped its cold hands around her throat. This was bigger than one officer. Bigger than one ship. This was organized. And Emily had stumbled directly into its path. The bartender stepped back quickly. "I've told you everything. Please, go before they see you." Laura nodded numbly and walked away, clutching her jacket closed as if it could shield her from what she now understood. Emily wasn't gone. Not yet. Not for certain. And if there was even a sliver of hope, Laura would burn down every port on the map to bring her back. But first, she needed to find the one person who vanished alongside her daughter, Alana. The bartender's final confession, crew members escorting girls off the ship at foreign ports, echoed in Laura's mind long after she left the terminal. It trailed her into every sleepless night, every whispered prayer, every moment when the world reminded her Emily was gone. For a while, she fought with all the strength a mother could scrape together. She filed appeals, contacted reporters, demanded answers from Carnival executives, and begged law enforcement to reopen the investigation. But every door she pushed against stayed shut. Every email she sent faded into silence. Every lead dissolved like sea foam against the rocks. And slowly, the noise of her grief became a dull, endless hum. 6 years passed. They did not pass quietly nor gracefully. They carved themselves into her, into the tightening lines around her mouth, into the weary slump of her shoulders, into the haunted way she scanned crowds as if expecting to see a familiar silhouette. Her life shrank to the narrow confines of a small apartment above a laundromat, the air always smelling faintly of detergent and exhaustion. She lost her job at the accounting firm after too many absences and too many breakdowns behind closed doors. Friends stopped visiting, unsure what to say to a woman who could talk about nothing but missing girls, corrupt cruise security, and the man in the white jacket. Her world became a dimly lit desk scattered with notebooks, printouts, and maps with red pins. She spent nights hunched over message boards dedicated to cruise disappearances, often drifting between conspiracy theories and genuine survivors' testimonies. The lines blurred. Her sanity sometimes blurred with them. Her savings evaporated. Her hope nearly did too. But not completely. Because one thought never left her. If they took girls, then someone somewhere had to be keeping them. On the 6th anniversary of Emily's death, though Laura increasingly refused to use that word, she forced herself out of the apartment for the coastal memorial held each year for passengers lost at sea. The wind was cool, whipping strands of her graying hair across her face. Families gathered in small clusters, holding candles that flickered against the dusk. Someone read out names. When they said Emily's, Laura's knees nearly buckled, but she held firm, jaw clenched, staring at the horizon as if it might return her daughter in a tide of truth. After the ceremony ended, people drifted away in quiet murmurs. Laura stayed for a while, watching the candles float on the water, tiny constellations trembling against the waves. She whispered the same promise she'd whispered every year. I'm not done. I'm not finished. Eventually she walked toward the small roadside grocery store to buy tea, something warm to anchor her shaking hands. The bell above the door jingled as she entered, and the fluorescent lights stung her eyes after the softness of dusk. She grabbed a box of chamomile and headed toward the checkout lane, then froze. A young woman stepped in from the opposite aisle, her hair falling in a long chestnut curtain, her posture tense as she clutched a bottle of water. Laura's breath caught in her throat so sharply she tasted blood. Emily. No, it couldn't be. It was impossible. But the girl's profile, the slope of her nose, the shape of her jaw, even the small freckle beneath her left ear. 6 years had passed, yet Laura would have known that face in a crowd of 1,000. Her vision tunneled. Sound dissolved. The entire store fell away until it was just the girl and the pounding of Laura's heart. The young woman glanced up, eyes flicking toward her. And in that split second, something flashed across her expression. Not recognition, but fear. Deep, instinctive fear. She turned quickly, pulling her hood up, and walked briskly toward the exit. Laura's legs moved before her mind did. Emily, she whispered. The girl didn't stop. Laura dropped the tea, sprinting after her, the bell chiming wildly overhead as she burst out into the parking lot. Rain began to fall, thin and cold, streaking the pavement with silver. The girl was already halfway across the lot, heading toward a dark SUV idling near the curb. Laura's breath fractured into desperate gasps. Emily! Emily! The girl paused for a fraction of a second, long enough for Laura to see her face turn toward her again. And then a man stepped out of the SUV. A man in a white jacket. Before Laura could scream, the girl ducked into the vehicle, the door slammed, and the SUV sped away, tires hissing against wet asphalt. Laura stood alone in the rain, trembling, heart breaking open and re-stitching itself all at once. Emily was alive. And someone was still taking her. She wiped the rain from her face, though it did nothing to steady her breath, and whispered into the night. I'm coming for you. The SUV's taillights vanished into the rain, leaving Laura standing breathless in the parking lot. For several seconds she couldn't move, her mind refused to catch up with what her eyes had seen. But the moment sensation returned to her legs, she ran toward her car, fumbling with the keys, heart hammering a frantic rhythm against her ribs. She didn't know how she would find the vehicle again, didn't know where it had gone, but she knew with a certainty that burned in her chest, Emily was alive. That was enough to propel her forward through the storm. She drove in wide circles around the neighborhood, scanning every street, every intersection, desperate for any sign of the black SUV. The rain smeared the windshield in watery streaks, headlights from passing cars blurring her vision, but she kept going until her breath grew shallow and her fingers cramped around the steering wheel. And just as she turned onto a quiet residential road, she saw it. Parked near a row of pastel townhomes. Engine off. Lights dark. Her pulse spiked. She parked half a block away and stepped out of her car, rain beating across her hair and shoulders. She moved slowly, her shoes splashing through shallow puddles, her breath fogging into the night air. Every instinct warned her to be cautious, but something deeper, older, primal, drove her forward. The force of a mother who had buried hope for 6 years only to have it resurrect itself in one impossible silhouette. Then she saw her. The girl, no, the woman, emerged from the SUV, hood down now, hair damp and clinging to the sides of her face. She walked toward one of the townhomes, shoulders hunched, clutching a small tote bag. A porch light flicked on, and 2 children burst out the front door. A boy of about 5 and a tiny girl, maybe 3. "Mama," they squealed, racing toward her. Laura stopped, the breath torn clean from her lungs. The woman laughed, Emily's laugh. Soft, lilting, the exact tone Laura used to hear echo through their apartment when Emily was a child. She crouched down, gathering both kids in her arms, kissing their cheeks as they wrapped themselves around her neck. Then a man stepped out onto the porch. Tall, early 30s, neatly trimmed beard. He placed a hand on the woman's back with casual familiarity, leaning in to kiss her temple. Every part of Laura's body went cold. The scene blurred, her throat tightening painfully. Emily, her Emily, standing there as if she had built an entire life without her. A life with children. A husband. A home. Laura moved without thinking. "Emily!" Her voice cracked through the night. The woman jerked upright, eyes widening as she spotted Laura standing at the edge of the driveway. The man frowned in confusion. The children clung tighter to their mother's legs. Laura stepped closer, tears already spilling down her cheeks. "It's you," she whispered. "It's really you." The woman swallowed hard. I'm sorry, you must be mistaken." Her voice trembled. But it was the same voice Laura had heard on hundreds of home videos, late-night conversations, and whispered goodnights. "Emily, please," Laura said, reaching toward her. "I'm your mother." The woman shook her head quickly, almost violently. "I don't know you." But fear flashed unmistakably across her expression, raw, gut-deep fear. Laura saw the mole beneath her left ear. The same one. She saw the way she shifted her weight, left foot slightly angled. Emily's old habit. She saw the way her hands trembled. "You know me," Laura whispered. "You remember." The woman's breath hitched. The man stepped forward, protective now. "Ma'am, you need to leave." But Laura didn't move. "Emily, why are you pretending? What did they do to you? Did someone take you? Did they threaten you?" The woman backed away slowly, clutching her children. "Please, go," she whispered. "You're putting me in danger." The word struck Laura like a blow. Before she could speak again, the woman grabbed her kids' hands and bolted into the townhome. The man followed, slamming the door behind them. Lights inside flickered, shadows shifting wildly. Laura stumbled toward the door, pressing her palm against it, sobbing. "Emily, don't run from me." But behind the door, there was only silence. And then footsteps. Running. Not inside. Behind her. Laura spun around just in time to see a figure in a white jacket disappearing around the corner of the building. Laura's hands trembled as she stepped back from the townhome, eyes scanning the darkened street. The figure in the white jacket had vanished into the shadows, leaving her with fragments of a truth she was still too terrified to piece together fully. But one fact burned brighter than anything else. That man, the one protecting Emily, was more than just a husband. He was a gatekeeper, a wall between Laura and her daughter. If she was going to reclaim Emily, she needed to know who he was. The name came from the whispers of neighbors who had witnessed brief encounters at the home. Daniel Cross. A man whose presence had materialized simultaneously with Emily's reappearance. Laura wrote it down in her notebook, circling it twice, feeling the words thrum on the page like a pulse. Her first stop was online. A shallow investigation she had repeated hundreds of times in the past 6 years, but this time, the search yielded something. Daniel Cross. Social media accounts, photos of lavish events, snapshots with prominent figures. It looked legitimate. A life built overnight. A persona meticulously crafted. But there was a gap. No history prior to 6 years ago. No records of college, employment, or even a verifiable address before that point. It was as if Daniel Cross had emerged fully formed, like some phantom from another world. Laura's stomach churned. The timelines were impossible. Emily had disappeared 6 years ago. Daniel Cross had appeared 6 years ago. The pieces clicked together, and a cold truth slid down her spine. He had entered her daughter's life the moment she was stolen. He hadn't just married Emily. He had acquired her. Digging deeper, Laura accessed corporate databases. Cross Holdings, Daniel's company, was registered through a maze of offshore accounts, shell corporations, and anonymous trustees. Each lead twisted back on itself, deliberately opaque, but faint traces emerged: investments in shipping lines, private ports, and logistics companies linked to controversial freight that never made it to public records. Her heart hammered. This wasn't just wealth. This was an infrastructure designed to obscure movement. People, not packages. Girls, likely, ferried discreetly between countries. A trafficking network hidden in plain sight. Laura's fingers shook over the keyboard. Every click, every detail she uncovered, painted a picture too dark to fully accept. Daniel Cross wasn't a businessman. He was a facilitator. A predator in a tailored suit. Her daughter wasn't just hidden. She was possessed. Purchased. Her thoughts raced back to the woman in the grocery store, the children calling her Mama, the man in the white jacket intercepting her. Emily hadn't simply run from Laura. She had been controlled. Guarded. Molded. Daniel Cross had built a life around her, constructed to appear normal, safe, and untouchable. Laura's hands curled into fists. Rage surged alongside grief. 6 years of silence. 6 years of lies. And all this time, the system had let a man like him flourish. She traced his corporate filings further, following the paper trail through tax havens and shell companies. Offshore accounts tied to cruises, to private charters, to properties in countries known for lax oversight. Each connection whispered a possibility that made her blood run colder. The officer in the white jacket wasn't acting alone. He was part of something far bigger, a network designed to obscure accountability, to make girls vanish as if the ocean had swallowed them whole. Laura slammed the laptop shut, heart hammering. Daniel Cross existed in public only because he was meant to. Every document forged, every record manipulated, every appearance orchestrated. And if she wanted Emily back, she had to pierce that illusion. The truth sat in her chest like a stone. Daniel Cross hadn't married Emily because he loved her. He had acquired her. He had built a life around controlling her, around hiding her from the mother who refused to let her go. Laura exhaled slowly, gripping the edge of her kitchen counter. She whispered to the empty room, the same vow she had repeated every day for 6 years. I will find you, Emily. No matter what it takes. And somewhere beyond the walls of her apartment, a man with a perfect life and a white jacket was about to discover that she had finally begun to fight back. Laura had followed every lead, traced every shadow, and navigated 6 years of silence, lies, and dead ends. Tonight, she finally found herself standing outside a dimly lit townhouse, the same one from the grocery store. The rain had stopped, leaving the streets slick and reflective, neon signs dancing in puddles like fragmented memories. Every instinct screamed caution, but her legs carried her forward, fueled by the single relentless thought: she needed to see her daughter. She slipped around the side of the building, heart hammering so loudly she feared it would echo across the quiet street. A single light glowed in the living room. Through the window, she saw Emily kneeling beside the children, tucking them into bed. The sight should have brought her peace, but it only tore at her heart. 6 years had stolen Emily from her, and now the motherly warmth she longed for was entangled with fear and secrecy. Laura knocked gently on the back door. It opened a crack. Emily's face appeared, eyes wide with recognition and terror. For a heartbeat, they simply stared at each other, the rain-slicked night compressing 6 years into one impossible moment. Mom, Emily whispered, voice trembling. Emily, Laura said, tears spilling down her cheeks, it's me. I've been looking for you. Emily's eyes flicked toward the children sleeping in the next room, then back to Laura. Her hands shook as she stepped outside, closing the door behind her. Mom, you shouldn't have come, she said, voice low, urgent. You have no idea, it's not safe. Laura grasped her shoulders. Safe? Emily, I don't care about safe. I care about you. Thought you were? I thought. I know what you thought, Emily cut her off sharply, stepping back, a shadow of panic passing across her features. I faked it. I faked my death. Laura froze. What? Emily swallowed hard, tears glimmering in the streetlight. After the cruise, after they took me, I had no choice. They threatened me. If I disobeyed, they said they'd... Her voice broke. They said they'd hurt anyone I cared about. Anyone. She looked down, voice shaking. I had to disappear. I had to let the world believe I was gone. I had to survive. Laura's chest constricted. And Daniel? The children. Emily flinched. The children are mine. They are my life. But Daniel, he is not who he says he is. He's part of the network that forced me into hiding. He gave me a life, but it's all a cage. I'm alive, yes, but I'm not free. Laura's hands dropped to her sides. The revelation hit her like ice water. 6 years of grief, rage, hope, all condensed into this single, impossible truth. Her daughter was alive, yes, but trapped, manipulated, and still in danger. Emily stepped closer, voice urgent, trembling with fear. Please, leave now. Before he notices. Before he realizes someone saw me. You can't fight him. Not yet. If he finds out, it will destroy everything I've built, and it could destroy me. Laura shook her head, tears spilling freely. Emily, I've waited 6 years. I won't leave you. I can't. We'll figure this out. Together. Emily's eyes shimmered with both relief and terror. I love you. But if you stay here, he will know. You'll endanger the children and me. You must go. Just for tonight. Promise me. Laura looked into her daughter's eyes, the same eyes she had kissed goodnight as a child, the same eyes that had whispered Mom. I'm scared years ago, and finally understood the depth of her suffering. She nodded slowly, swallowing the ache in her chest. Tonight, Laura whispered. But tomorrow we end this. I swear it, Emily. Emily exhaled, shaking, her body trembling as if she had been holding a storm inside for years. She pressed a hand to her mother's cheek, a fleeting, fragile connection. Tonight, she repeated. Then leave. Before he comes. Laura stepped back, heart fractured yet ignited with a new resolve. She watched her daughter retreat into the shadows of the townhouse, the children sleeping peacefully inside, and felt the weight of 6 years compress into a single, unrelenting truth. Emily was alive, but the fight for her freedom had only just begun. And somewhere beyond the night, Daniel Cross moved unseen, unaware that the reckoning was already taking shape. Laura had barely returned to her small apartment when the first warning arrived, a quiet knock on her door at midnight. She froze, the rain outside tapping against the window like anxious fingers. The adrenaline from the grocery store and the townhouse confrontation still pulsed in her veins. Emily's words echoed in her head, before he comes. Now she understood why. Daniel Cross knew. Somehow, he had found her. The knock came again, harder this time, deliberate. Laura didn't answer. Instead, she slipped to the window and peeked through the blinds. Shadows shifted on the street below, moving with calculated steps. The SUV she had seen Emily enter months ago was parked across the street. Its engine idling silently, as if waiting. Panic, sharp and immediate, hit her. This wasn't just surveillance, this was hunting. Daniel knew she had seen Emily. He would stop at nothing to reclaim control. The next morning, Laura contacted Detective Soto. He knows, she said, voice taut. He's tracking me. Soto's face was grave. That man is dangerous. He isn't just wealthy, he's organized. His influence spreads across ports, ships, and offshore companies. If he thinks you're interfering, he won't hesitate. Laura clenched her fists. Then we need to move. We need a plan. Emily, she's living under his shadow. I can't let him win. Soto nodded, a hard line forming around his mouth. We need evidence. Locations, names, anything that ties him to trafficking networks. Cruise staff, offshore accounts, anything. If we can expose him, we can free Emily. Laura's mind flashed back to the hidden phone, to the children, to the terrified glance her daughter had given her. Daniel Cross wasn't a husband. He was a predator. A man who saw Emily not as a person, but as property. Her daughter's fear had always been real. She pulled up the flight records, shipping logs, and financial data she had meticulously gathered over the past months. Every document pointed to the same terrifying conclusion. Daniel was part of a faction that systematically used cruise ships as acquisition grounds. Girls were selected, manipulated, threatened, and transported. He believed they belonged to him, and Emily had become the crown jewel in his carefully constructed network. Laura's blood ran cold as she reviewed a security log from one of Daniel's offshore shipping companies. A private dock, minimal surveillance, and the arrival of multiple unmarked containers flagged for confidential shipments. The language veiled human cargo. Emily had never left the cruise ship by accident. She had been moved through this shadowy infrastructure, his influence stretching farther than she had imagined. A sudden sound behind her made her spin. A shadow flitted across the doorway, disappearing before she could reach it. The realization hit. Daniel had eyes everywhere. He wasn't just guarding Emily, he was hunting anyone who tried to interfere. Laura's chest tightened. Every plan, every strategy she had imagined to reclaim her daughter now had to account for him. A man who owned her life, in his eyes, and would never allow her freedom willingly. Her resolve hardened. Daniel's wealth, his network, his power, they all paled against her mother's fury. He thought Emily belonged to him, that she would never escape. He was wrong. Clutching her notebook, Laura exhaled slowly. Her eyes scanned the dark city streets from her apartment window. Somewhere out there, Daniel was plotting, stalking, calculating. But she had something he had underestimated, the unbreakable bond between a mother and her daughter. The cat-and-mouse game had begun. And tonight, Daniel Cross would learn that fear could work both ways. Laura wasn't just looking for her daughter anymore. She was ready to take the fight to the man who had stolen her entire life. Rain hammered against the city streets as Laura and Emily moved through shadowed alleys, the children clutching their hands with sleepy, trusting fingers. Every corner they turned, every echo of footsteps, reminded them of the man they were fleeing. Daniel Cross. The man who had stolen 6 years of Emily's life, molded her identity, and built a cage around her children. His presence was invisible yet omnipresent, a constant threat pressing down on them. "Mom, we can't keep running forever," Emily whispered, voice tight, her eyes scanning every shadow. "He knows the city better than we do." Laura tightened her grip on the kid's hands, refusing to let fear cloud her focus. "We'll find a way, Emily. We have to. You deserve your life back." A sudden glint of headlights reflected off wet pavement. Daniel had found them. His black SUV blocked the street ahead, doors opening with precision. The man in the white jacket stepped out, no emotion on his face, only the cold, meticulous control that had dominated Emily's life for 6 years. "You shouldn't have come here," Daniel said, voice calm but menacing. "She belongs to me. And you," he gestured at Laura, "you've made this personal." Emily flinched, shielding the children instinctively. "You don't own me," she said, trembling, "and you never did." Daniel's lips curved into the faintest smile. "Ownership isn't about consent. It's about control. You were mine the moment they brought you from that ship. You were given a choice, survive or resist. You chose survival. That makes you mine." Laura stepped forward, fury replacing fear. "Stop speaking about her like she's property. She's a person, a mother. Your power ends here." Daniel's eyes flickered with annoyance, but he advanced anyway. Laura grabbed a metal pipe from a nearby construction zone, positioning herself between him and the family. Emily's hands shook, but she moved closer to her mother, children pressed to her chest. The confrontation escalated quickly. Daniel lunged. Laura swung the pipe, barely deflecting his hand. Rain slicked the ground, making every movement precarious. Shouts echoed off the walls of the alley. The children cried out in terror. Amid the chaos, Emily's voice rang sharp and commanding. "Stop. You're done." Her defiance, long suppressed, was sudden and pure. She grabbed the phone Laura had hidden in her coat, the one loaded with months of investigative evidence. Cruise logs, shipping manifests, hidden footage, and documentation linking Daniel to offshore trafficking operations. "You think I'm afraid of you?" Emily yelled, pressing send on an email address to authorities and media outlets worldwide. Screens, notifications, and alerts pinged almost immediately. Daniel froze, realization flashing in his eyes. Laura seized the moment, shoving him backward. The struggle was brief but intense. Daniel's authority, once absolute, was fractured by exposure. He snarled, retreating, and the family bolted. They ran until the city opened into an empty park, rain still falling but lessening, reflecting the neon lights and the tears streaming down Laura's face. She hugged Emily and the children tightly, each heartbeat a small victory, a reclamation of what had been stolen. But the victory was bitter. 6 years lost. 6 years of stolen birthdays, whispered confessions, and vanished opportunities. Emily's life, now free, was also irreparably fractured. She had survived, yes, but at the cost of every day she had once known, every memory rewritten under duress. Laura held her daughter, trembling. "You're safe," she whispered. "We made it." Emily's voice broke in sobs. "Safety. But it's never going to be the same. Not really." And as sirens approached in the distance, law enforcement finally responding to the evidence Laura and Emily had unleashed, the two of them stood in the rain, victorious yet haunted. Justice had arrived, but it was imperfect. Daniel Cross would face consequences, yes, but the system had failed them for years. Carnival had covered their tracks, the network had thrived, and innocence had been stolen. Emily stared into the dark sky, rain dripping down her cheeks, and whispered, almost to herself, "I'm alive, but who am I now?" Laura hugged her tighter. 6 years too late for goodbye. 6 years too long to reclaim what was lost. And yet, for the first time, she could promise her daughter one thing: a future she could fight for, together. The storm began to break, leaving the city soaked but glimmering under the first hints of dawn, as mother and daughter stepped forward, toward freedom, but forever scarred by what had been taken. The dawn broke over the city in muted shades of gray, casting long reflections across the wet streets where Laura and Emily had fled. They were safe for now, but the calm was fragile, the kind that preceded another storm. The evidence they had sent to the authorities was only the beginning. Daniel Cross might be cornered, but his network, the invisible web that had ensnared Emily 6 years ago, was far from fully exposed. Laura sat on the edge of Emily's bed, watching her daughter cradle one of the children, the other sleeping beside her. Every detail of Emily's life in the past 6 years had been carefully curated, carefully hidden, and carefully controlled. But as Laura sifted through the scattered files on the laptop she had carried for months, she realized how much had been invisible, how much the cameras and cruise logs never recorded. "This," Laura said softly, pointing to a folder labeled Unreleased Surveillance, "this shows everything that was kept from us." Emily's eyes flickered, wary but curious. "What do you mean?" Laura opened the folder. Images, videos, and cryptic messages filled the screen. Footage from hidden cameras in ports, encrypted conversations between Daniel and unknown associates, logs of girls moved through offshore shipping routes. But there were also files that shocked even Laura. Videos showing Emily and Alana being forced to leave the ship months before the staged death footage. These moments had never reached security reports or cruise records. The cameras had failed to capture coercion, manipulation, threats whispered in empty hallways, the human cost hidden behind the polished surfaces. Emily swallowed hard, her hands trembling as she watched herself on screen. The fear in her young eyes, the hesitation in her movements, the desperate glances she had cast toward the camera, all moments that the official narrative erased. The cruise staff had curated a story of accidental tragedy, of a fall that never truly explained the terror she had endured. "Mom," Emily whispered, voice tight, "they wanted the world to see only what they wanted to see. Not the fear, not the threats, not the truth." Laura nodded, gripping her daughter's hands. "And now we make the truth impossible to ignore." They spent hours cross-referencing the files, finding inconsistencies between official logs and the hidden surveillance. Names that didn't appear in any roster, calls that had been scrubbed, security shifts that were intentionally left undocumented. The camera never showed the hands that forced them, the voices that coerced them, the silent complicit nods of those who allowed the crimes to continue. The truth had always existed, but the world had been kept blind. Emily's gaze hardened. "I need to tell them everything," she said. "The children, Daniel, the network. Everything. If I don't, more girls will vanish, just like me and Alana." Laura exhaled, a mixture of relief and fear. The fight was far from over. Exposing Daniel Cross and his associates would dismantle the trafficking ring, but it would also put them all in danger. The network was vast, international, and ruthless. Suddenly, Emily paused, her expression unreadable. "Mom," she said slowly, "I've been living in someone else's shadow for 6 years. I've been forced into a life that isn't mine. Even if we survive this, I can't ever get that time back. That's something no camera can ever show." Laura nodded, tears forming again. She understood. Survival was not enough. Justice could be pursued, but the life Emily had lost could never be restored. The camera might capture evidence, but it could never capture grief, stolen childhoods, or the hollow ache of years lost to manipulation. The children slept soundly, oblivious to the storms that had shaped the adults around them. And outside, the world waited, oblivious, structured, polished, while the hidden truths that the camera never showed lay ready to shatter its illusions. Emily leaned against Laura, voice barely audible. "Let's make sure the world sees what they didn't, what they tried to hide." Laura held her daughter close. The fight for justice had only just begun, but for the first time, they were armed with the truth, a truth too long buried, and a story that would finally be told. And somewhere far beyond the city, the shadows of those who had orchestrated Emily's disappearance stirred, sensing that their carefully curated narrative was crumbling. The camera had never shown it, but now it would. Laura's world tilted the moment she saw the townhome from across the street. Months of painstaking investigation, encrypted emails, offshore accounts, and hidden cameras had all led to this one moment. The same townhouse where Emily had once hidden her life, where she had lived under duress, now stood before her in the late afternoon sun, ordinary in appearance yet monstrous in its purpose. She watched from behind a hedge, heart hammering. Emily emerged from the front door, children in tow. One small hand in each of hers, the children skipping lightly as if unaware of the danger that had defined their mother's past. And beside Emily, her chest tightening, stood Daniel Cross. The man who had stolen 6 years of her daughter's life, the man who had believed he owned Emily completely, the man who had orchestrated her disappearance and forced her into submission. Laura's breath caught. The children called out cheerfully, "Daddy! Daddy!" Laura's stomach dropped. They called Daniel, Daddy. Not Emily. Not anyone else. Not even a hint that he was a stranger masquerading as a family figure. Her pulse spiked as she stepped closer, unnoticed in the shadows. Emily turned, catching sight of her mother through the hedge. Her eyes widened, fear and relief mingling. She had been living this lie for so long that even a glimpse of reality threatened to destabilize her. Laura moved forward, voice breaking, "Emily!" Emily froze, glancing between her children, the man who had dictated her life, and the mother she had mourned for 6 years. Daniel turned at the sound, eyes narrowing immediately. He recognized the threat instantly. "Laura Mendez," he said, calm but deadly, his voice carrying the weight of control he had exercised over countless victims. "I should have known you'd show up." Emily stepped in front of the children instinctively, shielding them. Can't kill?" But Laura ignored the warning, tears streaming down her face. "Emily, you don't have to live like this anymore. You don't have to hide." Daniel's lips curled in a cold, measured smile. "Hide? You mean the life I've given her? She has comfort, security, children who love her, all because of me. You want to destroy that?" Emily's voice trembled as she took a step forward. "No, I don't belong to you. I'm not yours to control." The man's eyes darkened. "You were mine the moment they brought you from that cruise. Every choice you think you've had, every moment of freedom, was granted because I allowed it. And now, you stand here trying to undo what's been carefully orchestrated for 6 years. Laura gritted her teeth, stepping closer. She's human. She has a right to live her life, her way. Emily's gaze flicked to her children, their innocent faces unaware of the horrors that had shaped her past. She swallowed hard, voice breaking. Mom, leave. Please. He'll hurt us all if he knows you're here. Daniel took a threatening step forward. You belong with me. You always have. And I will not let you go. Not now, not ever. Emily's hand found Laura's. The silent bond between mother and daughter, unbroken even by 6 years of terror, held firm. Laura whispered, "We'll get through this. Together." For a moment, time seemed to suspend itself. The ordinary suburban street transformed into the epicenter of truth and lies, power and resistance. The man who had believed he owned Emily faced the reality he had never anticipated, the force of a mother's love and a daughter's courage united against him. Emily's voice rose, steadying herself. "It's over. You can't control me anymore." Daniel's jaw tightened, eyes flicking to the children, and for the first time, a hint of uncertainty crept into his expression. Laura tightened her grip on Emily's hand. The confrontation had begun. The man who thought he owned her life was about to discover something far more powerful than fear, a mother's relentless pursuit, and a daughter reclaiming everything that had been stolen. The courtroom was stark, fluorescent lights humming overhead, echoing off the walls filled with spectators and the press. Laura sat beside Emily, the children in tow, each holding tightly to her hands. Months of investigation, months of fear, and a lifetime of grief had led to this day. The day the world would finally see what the cameras had never captured, what the cruise lines had tried to bury, and what Daniel Cross had spent 6 years hiding. Emily's testimony was precise, measured, and terrifyingly brave. She recounted the days following her disappearance, the threats, the forced identity, and the carefully orchestrated life she had been pushed into. Each word was a shard of truth, cutting through years of deception. The courtroom murmured. Journalists scribbled furiously, and Laura felt a weight lifting even as a fresh ache settled in her chest. Daniel Cross sat at the defendant's table, his expression carefully composed, but every twitch of his hand betrayed the tension beneath. His lawyers attempted to frame him as a legitimate businessman, a protective husband, a man misunderstood. But Emily's evidence, emails, offshore records, hidden camera footage, and witness testimonies, was irrefutable. The world could no longer ignore the infrastructure he had built to manipulate and control. Laura watched Emily's eyes, seeing her daughter not as the girl who had been taken from her, but as the woman she had become, fierce, intelligent, and unbroken despite every attempt to erase her. And yet, she also saw the cost. Emily's life had been stolen, her childhood vanished, her sense of self fragmented. No courtroom could restore what had been lost. Outside the court, the media swarmed, cameras flashing, reporters clamoring for statements. Laura and Emily emerged together, holding hands, the children clinging close. There was relief in the air, but also exhaustion. A recognition that surviving was not the same as healing. Emily bent down to the children, brushing a wet strand of hair from her daughter's face. "We're free now," she whispered, though her voice was tinged with sadness. But freedom doesn't fix everything. It doesn't give back the years that were stolen, the fear that we endured, or the innocence that was taken. Laura nodded, tears slipping down her cheeks. "No. But it gives us tomorrow. And we can decide how to live it." Daniel Cross was escorted away, facing charges that would carry years of imprisonment. His empire of secrecy began to crumble, and the trafficking network that had enabled him slowly unraveled under legal scrutiny. Yet Laura knew the battle against such darkness was far from over. Others had vanished, others were still trapped, and the system that allowed it all to happen remained imperfect. Emily looked at her mother, voice soft. "I survived because you never gave up. But I'll never be the same." Laura pulled her close. "And that's okay. You're alive, and we have each other. We'll build something new. A life where fear doesn't dictate every moment." The children laughed quietly, chasing each other in the courthouse plaza, oblivious to the storm that had shaped their mother's past. It was a fragile joy, a tentative step toward normalcy. Laura took a deep breath, letting the air fill her lungs. Justice had been served, yet the victory was bittersweet. 6 years lost could never be returned. Innocence could not be restored. But truth had been revealed, and for the first time in a long time, the weight of silence had lifted. As mother and daughter walked side by side, Emily whispered one final thought, almost to herself. The cameras didn't show everything. But now, at least the world knows. Laura squeezed her hand. And we'll keep making sure they never forget. The sun broke through the clouds, scattering light across the city streets, illuminating the long path they had traveled, one filled with grief, resilience, and the unshakable bond between mother and daughter. It was the beginning of a life reclaimed, fragile and scarred, yet theirs. The aftermath of truth was not perfect, but it was real. And for Laura and Emily, that was enough.